That's actually a great segue, Jake. The next question's about Nostro-Vostro accounts. All right, so let's jump into that. So, David, we're going to have you go first this time. So, does an ultra high XRP evaluation make it more attractive for global tier one banks to abandon legacy pre-funded Nostro-Vostro accounts, or does a volatile high value asset introduce unacceptable balance sheet risk for conservative institutions?
Okay, so these pre-funded Nostro-Vostro accounts. The bottom line for me here, Mike, is that they do represent kind of a structural bottleneck in global finance. They anchor these corresponding banking networks. So it is, I think, increasingly economically unviable to use these Nostro-Vostro accounts. The legacy model requires that something like 20 trillion or 25 trillion, 27 trillion, be perpetually locked up in these pre-funded bilateral accounts, and it's simply to buffer against settlement delays. So this represents a staggering opportunity cost for financial institutions, right? But beyond these capital inefficiencies, this system is inherently slow and error prone, and it leaves institutions exposed to multi-day settlement risks, right? And it forces them to pass on these transaction costs, which are often between 1.5 and 3%, massively high, to their clients. So as the industry shifts towards 24/7 atomic settlement and real-time liquidity orchestration via tokenized deposits, as we're seeing now on the Canton network, and compliant stablecoins, as we're seeing with USDC and to a lesser extent USDT, but also RLUSD, the reliance on these trapped capital accounts, it's becoming an obsolete anchor on balance sheet efficiency. So you don't need a high value XRP to eliminate these Nostro-Vostro accounts. It's just, I think, again, it's one of these false arguments in favor of a high value XRP. So I think that what we're going to see moving forward is atomic settlement of fiat stables. And that will, make the Nostro-Vostro accounts a thing of the past.
All right. Well, you got 3 more minutes, but what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and kick it over to Jake for his 5 minutes. Let me reset my timer here, pull up my notes. All right. So the question again, Jake, is Nostro-Vostro unlocking versus capital efficiency. So does an ultra high XRP evaluation make it more attractive for global tier one banks to abandon legacy pre-funded Nostro-Vostro accounts, or does a volatile high value asset introduce unacceptable balance sheet risk for conservative institutions?
I would kind of challenge the question. So a higher price XRP would actually be more stable. So if you look at the NASDAQ, the S&P, these large indexes, it takes billions or trillions of dollars to move them 1-2%. Like it is a large amount of flows that cause them to, be able to shift them. So they actually become more stable the higher the price is. So to your point, if it was a volatile high price asset like Bitcoin, no, they're not going to do that. But if it is a stable high value price that's moderated by, say, an escrow to be able to maintain price stability out there and hold that high stable price because of the volume moving over the network, it would become more acceptable. But to David's point, atomic settlement is real. You can set up smart contracts and escrows and be able to swap things real time. There's some technology that Arthur Brito and David Schwartz and a few other people built at PolySign called AtomicNet. And it facilitates that. And it can route through XRP, but it doesn't necessarily have to route through XRP. So that's another one of those situations where it would have to be a high stable value and become tier one collateral for them to hold it on their balance sheet to be able to replace these Nostro-Vostro accounts. And I want to circle back to one of the points David made in the previous deal. So Ripple Prime, people are posting XRP, Bitcoin, and other cash deposits with them on their balance sheet to then take that and do other things with that liquidity while they maintain exposure to whatever it is. So that there is some benefit to banks to be able to continue to hold a certain asset on their balance sheet, and then post that for liquidity, because they may be making more off of it another way, or it might provide additional benefits for them to retain ownership of it during whatever transactions they're processing. So anyway, back to the question. Yeah, I think it has to be a high stable value for it to be attractive to banks. And if it is volatile and at a lower price, it's going to be more volatile because the market cap's not high enough. If you can change something by $1 billion in inflows and it's wildly modulating the price, they're not going to adopt it. And that's why I do think it needs to be a high stable value for this application.
I mean, you have a lot of time left, but my question would be, then why not just use a stable coin? I mean, it's
that's a good question, and a
you know,
lot of
it's
people have brought
easier.
that point up. If both counterparties want that same stable coin,
Mhm.
sure, that would be fine. But if somebody wants something else, banks don't want to hold other people's stable coins. They're incentivized to hold treasuries for their own stable coin, right? And if you did have, we will have all of these different stable coins issued by banks. You need something that sits in the middle that allows that to transfer the counterparty risk. Because banks after 2008 don't want to hold other banks' assets. They are unsure that other people have what they say they have, and
Doesn't
so that's
doesn't
additional
atomic
counterparty risk.
settlement and
Say that
I'm
again?
sorry, I want to kind of understand where you're
Yep.
coming from. But my understanding is, doesn't
Okay.
atomic settlement get rid of the counterparty risk?
To some extent, right? So you may not even be able to settle the transaction if all the pieces of the smart contract aren't met. The transaction won't execute if all of those parameters are not met for an atomic settlement. And so that can actually delay things. If certain things, were not happening, that payment wouldn't settle. It may take longer. And the ISO 20022 messaging system that Swift had put in place, it's kind of a prerequisite for instant settlement. You have to structure all the data on the front end so that everybody's managing that the same way. I don't know if you've ever uploaded like a CSV file, right? Like you'll
Yeah,
download something from one, and you've got to structure that data the right way to upload it
yeah.
into the
You
other one
got to
because
map it. You got to map the
yeah,
data. The data. Yeah,
they've structured that so everybody operates on the same columns and rows
yeah.
for all of the data now. So
It's a messaging format.
we're going to move to atomic settlement, and I think that there will be a portion of those flows that flows through XRP if it's a high stable value and it's faster and cheaper and more economical for them to do that. And there will also be other people that still have trusted exchange partners and people that they've worked with that will settle on other networks through the atomic settlement.
Perfect. All right. Well, Jake, you get to go first this time. And our third question is about supply dynamics and escrow economics. So, given that 100 billion XRP were pre-minted, with billions remaining in Ripple's escrow that unlocks monthly, does a high price per token artificially overcapitalize a single corporate entity at the expense of decentralization? Or is that high market cap necessary for macro utility?
I would say both. I don't believe that Ripple's going to end up with the escrow. I think that there's a lot of pre-negotiated options and contracts that they have for distribution on that. If they were going to retain the escrow, they would have kept it in one wallet. They would have gone back and forth with the escrow to one wallet. But they have over 50 wallets that the escrow has been distributed to, which you can look up on XRP Scan and see. So the management of that escrow is interesting. They met with the IMF in 2017. A lot of different conversations there with the Fed in 2014 after Greg Kidd came onto the board. So I don't think that they're going to retain ownership of the escrow, even in the Clarity Act. They wouldn't be able to. They can't hold more than 20% of the total supply of that token if and when that passes. Now, if they get their banking license, that changes a little bit. They could, continue to hold on to a large portion of that, but they've managed the escrow responsibly. And I think you need that. You need some. It is deflationary, right? So there's 14 million XRP less than the 100 billion that were originally minted. There's less and less every single day because of the gas fees, which I think that's the next question. It burns a little bit every single day.
You're looking at my sheet.
But it's inherently deflationary. But you still need to be able to add supply to what's out there if there is more demand in order to be able to maintain price stability. I think they've been very methodical about how they've thought about this, and it's very counterintuitive to the other ways that tokenomics has worked in the past. People want to look at a low supply because if there's more demand, that pushes the price of that token up, right? Like you look at Hype as an example. They're making all of this money off their perps market, and then they're using that to buy back the token and drive demand, and then burn those tokens, so it reduces the supply and pushes the value higher and incentivizes people to purchase it. Retail comes in, and then they'll do something else with it later that'll drive additional demand for retail, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can skin this cat, but I think that for the way that Ripple's gone to market and the other counterparties that I think will be utilizing the XRPL, which is R3, SBI in Japan, and many other large organizations that have yet to come out and speak about it. It's not going to be fully predicated. It is going to be, the other piece is like the XRP token isn't a governance token. There are 35 UNL validators that have to vote on all the amendments on the network. Ripple controls 3 of those. So there are 32 other validators outside the scope of Ripple that have to update the network. They vote on all the things. They have to achieve 80% plus 1 additional vote in order for an amendment to pass. It then takes 2 weeks for it to get implemented on the network. So they don't have control. Like, just because they hold a large supply of the token, it doesn't work necessarily like proof of stake or proof of work on these other chains, which would give you significant influence over how the network actually functions.
Perfect. All right, David, your 5 minutes starts. Do you want me to ask?
I think I recall the question there, Mike.
All right, here we go. Reset and 5 minutes. Go.
Awesome. So a little bit about the bearish reality of a pre-minted supply, okay, and this so-called escrow mechanism. So one of the most significant, I think, structural headwinds for XRP's long-term price appreciation is this unique distribution history that it has, and the ongoing influence of this escrow mechanism, as most people like to call it. So unlike Bitcoin or, Jake, you were talking a little bit about Hyperliquid with its Hype token. Unlike Bitcoin, though, other assets that are minted into existence by a decentralized network over the course of, months or years or even decades, XRP is different, right? So it was created in its entirety at the ledger's inception back in 2012. So 100 billion XRP tokens were pre-mined, I guess you could say. And that, means that the entire supply existed from day one. So a massive portion of the supply was retained by Ripple Labs, which, as we all know, is the private company behind the XRP ledger and this technology. What a great game they're playing, by the way. Mint your own thing and then dump it on retail to fund your business. Great game. So to prevent the market from being flooded with this massive stash of tokens, which would have definitely crashed the price immediately, the guys at Ripple were smart. What they did is they implemented this escrow system, but they implemented it in 2017, I think, not in 2012. So think of this escrow, you could think of it like a giant digital safe, right? With a built-in time lock. So it holds tens of billions of XRP that are not currently in the circulating supply. So every single month, on the first day of the month, the safe automatically unlocks 1 billion XRP. Dude, what a great game to be able to fund your business with some fake Fugazi coin that you just made up out of thin air that does nothing. It's amazing. Great business. So Ripple Labs, it then assesses what it needs for the month to fund its operations, to fund its developer grants, and to fund its institutional liquidity programs. Dude, again, what an amazing game. So whatever Ripple Labs doesn't use, they lock back into a new safe for the future. They're like printing their own money and just dumping these coins on retail. So while this system was designed to provide, supply predictability, from my bearish perspective, I think it functions as a constant structural weight on the price because there's always supply to sell. So this is what a lot of other analysts call a supply overhang. So imagine trying to push the price higher while you know that there's a massive known amount of supply that's just waiting in the wings to be sold, waiting in the wings to enter the market and just be dumped on retail, unsuspecting retail. So the market is always aware that these billions of tokens, that they exist and that they could be released. So this realization, it creates a ceiling on the price, not a floor. So for the value of XRP to trend significantly upward, the market demand has to not just be high, but overwhelmingly strong. And it has to be powerful enough to absorb any potential new supply entering the market every single month, just to keep the price from sliding. So, this mechanism, this escrow mechanism, it introduces also a significant centralization risk, right? So this is something that I think a lot of investors just overlook. So in a decentralized asset, Jake, you mentioned Bitcoin. In a decentralized asset, the supply schedule is set in stone by code. Code is law, and no single entity controls it. But with XRP, the supply is released by Ripple Labs, a private company. It's not even a public company. There's no window into the company. So if market demand ever cools down, even for a short period of time, and remember, you've got that constant release of tokens that acts like a weight, dragging the price down, well, then, XRP token holders, they're constantly in a race to find new buyers, to absorb these monthly unlocks. So, yeah, man, it's an uphill battle for sure. An uphill battle for XRP token holders, I think.